Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We're about to pull up the presentation. Annie, great. That's awesome. I remember that. Just bear with us as we get the PowerPoint back up. There it is. Super. In just a minute, I'm going to introduce Chris. And in the meantime, if you're just getting in here, put your name in the chat. I know there's people probably just getting in. Put your name in the chat, where you're from. We've got people all over the U.S. here right now.
Hey, Paul, see, we got a full house. I'm ready to get going.
Sounds great. Okay, super. At this time, I'm going to introduce Chris Ritter. Welcome, everybody, to the Process of Dryland training webinar presented by Surge Strength. Many of you may have already been on Ritter and or Surge Strength webinars in the past with Chris Ritter, but I know we have some new people in the audience as well. So I wanted to take a brief moment to introduce Chris Ritter before he begins his presentation on the process of dryland training. Chris Ritter is a swimmer, having competed in swimming most of his childhood and eventually in college as well. His final collegiate season was under the legendary swim coach Bob Steele at Cal State Bakersfield University, a team that won the NC2A D2 National Championship. While still earning his undergraduate degree, Chris began swim coaching and personal training. He's coached at every level, from summer league to working with Olympic swimmers, winning gold medals and breaking world records. Chris has a passion to help push swimming and specifically dryland education forward. He also wants to empower both coaches and swimmers with information to allow them to reach their full potential. That's the origins behind him founding Ritter Sports Performance, which is going on 11 years, helping coaches and swimmers by providing them strength training and dryland programs to enhance all around teams all around the world through their Surge Strength dryland programs. In the last year, Chris has led the team at Ritter to create a first and only strength and conditioning certification that specifically addresses dryland training for swimmers, the Surge Strength Dryland Certification. Chris's education includes a Bachelor's of Science in Kinesiology and Exercise Science. He also has earned all of the most prominent certifications in both the strength and conditioning field as well as the swimming world. As I've mentioned before, Chris has been both coaching swimming and working as a strength coach since well before he was even out of undergrad. He's also continuing to evolve his approach to dryland and will tell you himself that the program he programs and how he coaches is different now than what he was doing 5 or 10 years ago. Chris is never done learning. And I know a lot of you in the audience share that virtue of being a lifelong learner, so thanks for being here. In the late 2000s, Chris was one of the only swim coaches in the country that was also certified in strength and conditioning. He's continually adapted strength training principles to specifically help swimmers get faster in the water. He even developed an entire curriculum for one of the largest and most successful clubs in the country. And even though at that time he was one of the youngest coaches on staff, he was charged with teaching the rest of the coaches how to approach dryland training to get better results with swimmers that they have in their group. This included young age group swimmers like the 10 and unders all the way to the senior swimmers with OT cuts. And if you're wondering if Chris's approach to dryland training works, the results speak for themselves. He guided Cullen Jones in his dryland training leading up to Cullen being part of the most historic relay in Olympic history when the U.S. came from behind and won a gold medal and world record time at the 2008 Olympic Games. During those Olympic Games, multiple swimmers who competed had been strength training with Chris. A few years after the 2008 Olympics, Chris worked to expand his reach, and that's when Ritter Sports Performance was founded. Their biggest client base came from master swimming. Chris successfully trained swimmers in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s to achieve lifetime best times. Many were swimming faster than they had in college or high school. Among those swimmers were multiple world champions for masters swimming, as well as multiple masters world records broken. To date, the Surge Strength Dryland programs have been delivered to over 1,000 athletes, totaling over 20,000 workouts. I think it's safe to say Chris has a bit of a track record of success when it comes to creating dryland programs that result in swimmers going faster. While the dryland programs from Surge Strength are the longest running resource, there's also the Surge Strength podcast. Of course, this webinar, and you can find regular articles from Chris on SwimSlam. Chris is always trying to give more back to the swimming community than he received. The most recent resources that were created in the past year include the Surge Strength Academy, which hosts many free dryland one-on-one digital courses. This is also where the Surge Strength Dryland certification is hosted, which has already seen enrollment from hundreds of coaches, swimmers, and supporters of swimmers from around the world to become Surge Strength Dryland certified and are now able to put the SSDC credentials behind their name. Chris will speak a little more about your opportunity to join them at the end of this webinar. But now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome and turn over the presentation to Chris Ritter. Chris, thanks for being here tonight.
Paul, thanks so much for that introduction. And I wanted to give a shout out to Bob Steele. I actually saw him in the audience.
Right
So
on.
I saw his
Welcome,
name
Coach
fly by.
Steele.
So just wanted to say hi to Bob there. Paul, thanks so much for hosting us here. We'll see you back towards the end of the presentation. Welcome, everybody. Thanks again for joining us tonight. And I hope that you think about this as not just the process of dryland training, but the new process or your new process of dryland training. I have packed a bunch of stuff into tonight. I am fairly confident we are going to get all the way through it. If you ask my team, they are not surprised that I tried to stuff as much as I did into this. I want to make sure I provide you guys value, and we're going to be doing Q&A at the end as well. I believe the chat is being disabled, and so feel free to drop those questions in the Q&A, not the chat, during the presentation. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll open up the chat again. But here's my goal for you tonight, taking time out of your Sunday night to join us here again. When I think about dryland overall and the process of dryland training that we've developed now for over a decade with the results that Paul was talking about, I feel like it goes into three distinct buckets. And I think most coaches, if they're honest with themselves, they maybe have one or two, but it's rare to see all three. And so I felt I wanted to hit all three of these. How can we have the process of dryland be safe, be engaging, and of course, be effective? We want to see the results. So I'm going to talk on each of those points tonight. And if this is your first webinar, this is probably the first time you're hearing this, but if not, I'm sure you've heard us say this before. We believe that better athletes equal faster swimmers. And I'm glad that you took the time out of your night to find out how you can improve that process, whatever your current situation. Like I said, we've disabled the chat. I'd appreciate if you turn off all notifications, whether on your computer or phone. You already committed the time to be here, so why not make sure it's distraction free and you can get the most out of this experience. Again, submit questions privately through the Q&A. We're going to disable the chat till the end of the presentation and then open it back up. So obviously, if there's a question as I'm going through, just drop it in the Q&A. Jason's going to get to that and we will bring it back up at the end. So starting off, process of dryland. Safety, number one, right? We don't want our swimmers to get hurt. And I think that this is the case whether you're a rec swimmer, which I have coached. It was actually my first coaching job, coaching at a summer league outside of Bakersfield, where I had to teach half the kids, or at least half the males, what a jammer was and how to put that on. And like Paul said, I've worked with Olympians as well. I could tell you neither one of them or any swimmer in between wants to deal with injuries. It is absolutely the worst, because if you can't practice, if you can't get in the water, there's no way you're going to improve in swimming. It's such a quote unquote honest sport, right? We feel that we appreciate the sport because you get out of it what you put in. And so that's why it's so important to me to make sure that we cover safety first. Now, it's not just safety outside of the pool, that we're talking about with Dryland specifically, but just think about the sport in and of itself. It is incredibly, incredibly repetitious. And Dryland, just number one, is a good way to offset that repetition, but only when done properly. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So if you've never thought about swimming as such a repetitive sport or the effects of it, let's just put this a little bit clearer. If the average swimmer, and I know again, we're talking average here, maybe you have swimmers that are taking much more than 14 strokes a lap, and maybe you got ones that are taking 6 to 8 strokes. Good for you working on that DPS. I'm sure Paul could talk to you about some of the techniques and that he's worked with his group in particular on that. But with 14 strokes a lap on average in a week, you're talking 13,000 strokes. Just think about that for a second. 13,000 of anything. I mean, I look at my step thing, and today I think I went on a 10-mile hike or so, and I'm at 12,000, 13,000 steps, but still in a practice, 13,000 of something. And then if a year goes by, we're almost up to 1 million strokes. What happens if your technique is just a little bit off on 1 million times, right? We talk about those micro injuries, just a little pinprick. What if I pinpricked you on the arm in the exact same spot 1 million times? Do you think it'd hurt? Do you think I'd get blood by the 1,000,000th time? Whatever you do 1 million times, it's going to have impact. And so number one, Dryland has to offset that repetition that the sport of swimming is by nature. Now, my approach to Dryland and to coaching in general is always to do no harm first. We don't want to put a swimmer in a situation where, this might not work out. We're not sure how this is going to go. I hope you don't get injured, cross your fingers. That's not the approach we want. We want to make sure the swimmers are staying in the water. They're enjoying the sport because this is a lifelong sport. I've been privileged to be at Masters meets where I've watched a world record be broken by 4 swimmers on that team being 90 plus years old. Those are my heroes. I hope I'm on a relay when I'm 90 years old, breaking a world record for the oldest relay. And so we don't want injury to happen. So we have this huge volume, this huge repetition that we're dealing with in the pool on the one hand, but then also on the other hand with Dryland, because of the nature of it, and we're not in a fluid environment, there is a much quicker way to have injuries. It can happen so much faster. You think about if your stroke technique is a little bit off, it's usually going to take a few weeks, maybe in a few months, maybe a few years for you to start, my shoulder's kind of bugging me. Well, in Dryland, you pick up a weight the wrong way, you could have a flare up in your back, you could have a muscle strain. So not only do we want Dryland to help support the repetition or be a counterbalance to the repetition of the sport, we also need to be very aware that one wrong mistake in Dryland training can really injure a swimmer. And that's the worst. If your swimmer is injured, not just doing the sport, but doing something outside of the sport, that's got to weigh on your mind as a coach. And so in that vein of thought, don't be attracted to these complicated, fancy, I call them circus type exercises. You see the one up there on the upside down Bosu ball trying to do a squat. Yeah, that looks fancy, but guess what? The risk of injury is a lot more likely in that scenario. Whereas most of the coaches here, and I saw the poll that we had most of our coaches, we have some swimmers and some others invested in swimmers, but most of your coaches here in the audience. So your swimmers, if you can picture them in your mind and their athleticism, I'm guessing most of them are kind of in the middle or maybe on the lower end, especially when it comes to exercises in a Dryland environment. So if we want to avoid injuries, we got to figure out, well, how do they happen? How do we avoid what is likely going to cause an injury? And I really think it boils down to these 3 things. There's either poor technique, your programming or your periodization plan is either too much too fast, or there's imbalances. Now, remember, we've already established that the sport of swimming is already imbalanced. That's a given. You are always going to have that be a part of this sport, no matter what. So imbalances are there to stay. And luckily, if you're having a swimmer that doesn't have a lot of imbalances, count your lucky stars on that, because most swimmers are going to have something. So that's a given. The poor technique and the too much too fast, that comes with knowledge. And so the solutions for that are technique cues, making sure your athletes know not only cues to identify what they're doing, but maybe even self-coach. That's where you can really get some bang for your buck. If you as a coach can give your athletes a couple technique cues for specific exercises, now you go from a one-on-one situation to now everyone is self-coaching themselves. Proper periodization. We're going to touch on that just a little bit here, but don't go down the rabbit hole of periodization. I would rather you make it simpler and more gradual for the swimmers to not have to risk going too much too fast and injuring themselves. And then in terms of the imbalance, what we're going to jump into right here is movement assessments. Because like I said, almost every swimmer that comes to you, they're going to have some kind of underlying issue. Now, it may not turn into an injury tomorrow. It may not turn into an injury next month, next year, but I believe it's your responsibility, your duty as a coach, that you took the time to be on this webinar. You're going to get this information. I hope you don't just bury your head into the sand and say, okay, I'm not going to worry about that. But look at what your swimmers are presenting you and give them the opportunity to reach the full potential that they have in this sport. So with movement assessments in particular, what we're really trying to do is identify poor movement patterns and then give your swimmers solutions to fix it. And if you empower your swimmers, they are going to take that and run with it. And maybe not all of them, but at least the majority of their group. If you give them, hey guys, I see the shoulder mobility is this, you need to do these exercises before and after practice at home. This is how you get buy-in for Dryland. I'm already jumping ahead of myself. I'm so excited here, guys. So movement assessments. This is what we've come up with at Surge Strength here. These 7 movement assessments. We're going to touch on the shoulder mobility one because I believe that's the most important one. And we go over all of these in depth in the Surge Strength Dryland certification, but I felt that shoulder mobility was the best one to pick out tonight. So when you are assessing swimmers, specifically in the shoulder mobility, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to have a swimmer take the arm behind their back, underneath on one side, and then over top on the other. What you're basically going to do is measure their hand. So the length of their hand from the bottom of their palm all the way up to their middle finger. We're looking for 1.5 times that. Is their fists closer than 1.5 times or further apart? And that's how you're going to score it. So just for a little bit more visual effect here, this is what you're actually going to have your do swimmers, and you're measuring the arm that goes underneath. So right now we're measuring the left side, and now we're going to measure the right side. You're also going to want to notice too, is there a big difference from one side to the other? So this athlete in particular is pretty symmetrical in terms of where he is a little bit closer on the left side, actually a little bit more mobility on the left shoulder than the right shoulder. And I have to measure his hands, but I feel like we'd probably, that might be a 1. I think the other side's definitely a 2. So with him, he's going to fall into that second result down there, the shoulder mobility of 1-2 score. So if the swimmer scores 2-2 on both sides, great, good for you. You are good to go. You're going to be clean on almost all exercises that are involving the shoulder, and you don't have to really worry about it. And you shouldn't worry about your swimmers having shoulder injuries. If though your swimmers score a 1 on either or both sides, proceed with caution. It's not that you have to say, hey, stop swimming, you're about to get a shoulder injury tomorrow. It's not that severe, but this should be in the back of your mind. And this is where I come back to your responsibility as a coach to give them solutions. Say, hey, Jimmy, your right shoulder looks way tighter than your left shoulder. Now, that also could be a thing of if he's always breathing to his right side, that's going to make a difference too. So bilateral breathing is always a great thing to practice as well. But let's just say Jimmy's right shoulder is really tight. As a coach, it's your duty to make sure you give him some exercises, some solutions that he can then implement and not just wait for something bad to happen. So we've put together all of these solutions where basically you get to pick through which one fits the best, because it's not a one size fits all. So with somebody that has really tight shoulders, they may need a super beginner solution, whereas others may be a middle of the road, maybe others a little bit more advanced. They just need a little bit of help. And so without the one size fits all solution, you have the option to go through all of these exercises, and all of these exercises are actually on our YouTube channel as well at Surge Strength, and you can start implementing them today. Now, if I had a swimmer that scored a 1 on either one shoulder or especially for both, I would give at least 3 to 4 of these exercises. And I would say, hey, you need to make sure you are doing these before practice, after practice, and probably right before you go to bed at night. If you do that, I guarantee that the functionality of that shoulder is going to improve, and you're greatly reducing your chances of injury to that joint down the road. Now, making sure that your swimmers have the capability to do dryland exercises, that's a whole nother thing, right? Right now, I'm just talking about just keeping them in the water, just being able to practice. Now, if we move to dryland and your swimmer has tight shoulder on either one or both sides, it can be really quick where you give them an exercise and their shoulder doesn't have the mobility to do that. It doesn't have the strength to do that. And real quick, an injury can happen like that. It's not like in the pool where over a few weeks it may develop and they're getting some soreness, you're pulling out some sets. It could happen in an instant. So this is why I'm so stuck on the process of dryland training. And hope is not a process. Crossing your fingers after you scroll through Instagram or YouTube and saying, oh, this exercise looks good, I should try that with Jimmy. But Jimmy's shoulder doesn't have a great bit of mobility, especially on the right side. I'll just cross my fingers and hope it works out. That is not a good solution, especially as a coach. I don't think that's responsible. I don't think that's helping Jimmy reach his full potential as a swimmer. But the problem is, if you don't know the solutions as a coach right now, what are you going to do? And I get it. And so that's why we just showed you a couple of movement solutions. But I want to go to my story in particular. So in high school, senior year, I had a coaching change where the longtime coach that I had really gotten good at had another job opportunity and left. And so I had a new coach come in. New coach didn't really know a lot about dryland, really didn't care, but we were doing a dryland program. I was a distance swimmer. I was a very slow swimmer. So the only thing I was doing was distance. I couldn't go very fast, but I could go very long. And I had a high pain tolerance. Remember that, high pain tolerance. So I got shown my dryland workout, and coach, again, really didn't care that much about it. He's like, yeah, go do this if you have some time. It'll help you, whatever, just get to the pool. And so, like a very diligent swimmer, one with a high pain threshold, I thought, great, no pain, no gain, right? I'm going to go in there, tear up this dryland workout. Coach says I'm going to do it 2 times a week. I'm going to do it 3 or 4. And what do you know? After a few times of doing the bench press, I hear a pop. My shoulder's popping every time I'm doing the bench press. But what do I care? I got a high pain threshold. I'm going to do the dryland program. I know that dryland's probably going to help me as a swimmer. Guess what? I don't. You don't even have to guess. Shoulder severely messed up my senior year in high school. Basically had to kick, or not even was able to do that a lot of the time, and almost ruined my senior year in high school. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to swim in college at that point. Now, I tell you this story not to pile on my coaches at all. I had great coaches. I'm lucky enough to have some of the historically great coaches, one of them in the audience here, Bob Steele. So I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying, though, it's your responsibility as a coach to figure out how to do dryland well, because you are going to have swimmers like me in your group who are head down, push through. I'm going to push through this. I want to make myself better. I want to see how far I can go. And if you plead ignorance, if you plead, oh, I don't know, dryland's not my thing. I know how to coach you in the water. I know technique. You are doing a disservice to your swimmers. Now, I don't mean to yell at you, like scold you here, because I know you're at the webinar here to learn, but I really want to make sure you understand how serious I am coming from this as. I think about all the coaches that are out there. They're trying to do good. I don't think you get into this profession because you want to screw swimmers up or you want them to have injuries. I believe that every coach has good intentions, but the problem is when good intentions don't meet actual knowledge and progression as a coach, that's where injuries are going to happen for swimmers, and the swimmers are going to be the ones that suffer. Here's one coach that I've known for a while now. I've really gotten to know him a lot and appreciate his approach, Jim Vanetta. He's gone through our surge strength dryland certification. And one of the things that he said that really struck me is he said, before I went through this, he was actually worried. Like, I don't want to do that because I'm afraid I'm going to mess up their shoulder. I'm not sure if that exercise is going to work. I'm not sure if my swimmer is ready for that. And I appreciate that was Jim's approach. He was trying to do first, do no harm, right? He didn't want to injure his swimmers. But now, as we've had more conversations through it, looking back, there was things that he could have checked off where he said, okay, Jimmy's shoulder or whoever's shoulder I'm dealing with, they're good. We can do this exercise. But this other swimmer, not good. So Jim didn't know. He just had the sense of, I don't want to mess up and injure him, which is not that much better than not having knowledge at all. So I know some of you probably feel very similar to Jim, where you're like, I don't want to injure my swimmers, but you're not 100% sure how to actually go about it. And that's what we're really going to dig into today. So with safety, you always have to make sure your athletes are safe doing the movements, but you don't know that unless you do a movement assessment and actually implement the solutions. And like I said, we've developed 7 assessments and then solutions based on that. The shoulder mobility, absolutely the number one thing I would do if you're going to skip all the others, because it's such an important factor in terms of swimmers and their performance. Now, we're going to kind of leave safety off for a second. And now we're going to get into the engagement, because I feel in terms of the discussions I have with coaches, this is probably their number one thing they'll talk to me about. Chris, my kids don't care about Dryland. They're not engaged. And you feel the frustration as a coach, like take Dryland seriously, or, put a little bit more effort into it. Why aren't you guys seeing what we can gain out of Dryland? Maybe you as a coach know what they can gain, but maybe the light bulb hasn't gone off for them yet. So that's what we're going to talk about here. And similar in that we have a standard to go about this. We have performance tests to determine what's the appropriate level to challenge swimmers. And you're going to see how this kind of ties into safety here as well. That's why I said we're not completely done with it. So here are the 7 assessments, or the 7 performance tests that we've created here at Surge Strength. And we're actually going to focus on the bridge combo test. We're going to break that down a little bit more. Now, why the bridge combo test, you might ask? Well, I'll just ask you the question back. Which do you think is going to move faster through the water, a rubber raft or a kayak? Of course, the kayak is not only going to move faster, I'll tell you the other thing, it's going to take less effort. I could push it just a little bit, and that kayak is going to sail through the water. Whereas the rubber raft, I'm going to have to get a running start and really push it. And why is that? It's the tension. It's how tight the materials are. So if your swimmers are soft in the middle, guess what? There's no way they're only taking 14 strokes a lap. It's more like 20. Whereas if the swimmer is really tight down the middle, they're probably going to be 8 or 10 strokes across the pool. And of course, we're always chasing efficiency in swimming. So the bridge combo test can really show you where your swimmers are at, and more importantly, how to get them more like a kayak than a rubber raft. Now, I'm sure a lot of your swimmers are going to look like a lot of these variations, maybe a little bit more like the top than the bottom. But obviously, when you're in a bridge position, and I define bridge as on your forearms, whereas plank is on your hands, more push-up position. So we're in our forearms here. The real key to this, and I go back to when I was working with those swimmers trying to reach the Olympics in the 2008 Beijing Olympics, it was in the middle of what we term as the super suit era. These suits that basically let you float on water. Some were termed cheater suits. And then, a year or two later, they kind of got banned by FINA, and now they're much different tech suits, not nearly the level of buoyancy and compression that they once were. But looking back on that time, and we saw all the world records just fall, what I found is the big thing that was undervalued was the factor of compression, specifically in the middle. Well, if you approach bracing, and that's how we term core training at Surge Strength, because we want you to think about it differently than just whatever core has been to you in the past, because I'm sure it's not on the level that we need it to turn your swimmers into kayaks. So when we think about bracing, that actually allows your swimmers to develop a natural supersuit. Think about if your swimmers can learn to keep the tension that the supersuits did provide artificially, but as soon as you got out of them, you didn't have the compression anymore. You didn't have the tautness from fingertips all the way down to your toes. One coach that I loved how she phrased this, and she's down in Texas. She works with 12 and unders, real little kids. And she was talking about when she does the brace training, the core work with her swimmers, she tells them, hey guys, now we are working on getting your natural supersuit. It's going to be better than any tech suit you had. And I love that she takes that approach with your younger swimmers to try to get excited and empower them. Hey guys, this is how we can get faster. Be like a kayak. Here are the exercises we're going to do to make you be like a kayak in the water. And this is going to be better than any tech suit you can buy, even better than the super suits back in the late 2000s. And here's the other cool thing too. So on the podcast recently, I had her on the Surge Strength podcast, and she's down in Texas. And I'm sure like every other place this last year, water time has just been a mess. And for them in particular, it seemed really rough, where they would get in the water for a few weeks, then be out for a few weeks or month, then in for a week or two, then out. And it was just this yo-yo back and forth. So frustrating for Ann as a coach. But here's the craziest thing. So when they're not in the water, she was working through the Surge Strength Dryland certification, and she was doing the Zoom Drylands like I think every other swim coach was for the last year or so. And they were really diligent about the bracing exercises. And she was learning the progression. She was learning the testing. And okay, I tested this level, so I need to be at this level of exercises for my athletes. Oh, maybe I have one or two athletes that are kind of at a higher level, so I'm going to make sure I challenge them. And maybe one or two athletes that are lower level, so I need to make sure I accommodate them. Well, they were out of the water for a few weeks. They get back in. And of course, like any coach, you're like, all right, first day back in, I don't really know what I'm going to see. Let's just kind of move around, get a feel for the water. As a coach, you're using your coach's eye to try to see where they're at. She was blown away. And another coach just mouth dropped as she's pointing at the kid. And they're like, look at this body line. Look at how few strokes they are now taking to go across the pool. They didn't have to have more water time for that. In fact, they didn't even need more dry land time for that. What they needed was focus and application in what they were doing with their dry land training, to be very specific and how they could over Zoom. Again, no one was a Zoom expert a year ago. Ann was no different. She's trying to gather 10 and unders. I can't even imagine trying to do regular Zoom dryland sessions with 10 and under kids. Like, talk about trying to keep the attention span, right? But Ann was very persistent in terms of, all right, these are the exercises I need to have my swimmers do. We're going to do this. We're going to follow the plan that we've set out here at Surge Strength. And then when they get back in the water a few weeks later, blown away by the improvement of how the swimmers look in the water. This is the power of what I'm talking about you can do by building a natural tech suit. So here's actually the bridge combo test. So you get your swimmer in a bridge. Once they are set, you start the timer. They're going to hold that position for 1 minute. When a minute is up, then they're going to raise one foot just a few inches above the ground. 15 seconds you do that. Then 15 seconds for the other foot. Then 15 seconds for the arm out. Then 15 seconds for the other arm out. If you're keeping track on math, we're at 2 minutes now. The last 30 seconds, we go 15 seconds arm opposite leg, 15 seconds arm opposite leg. Obviously, we sped it up for the video, but that is a full 2.5 minute test for the bridge combo test. I would encourage you the next time you see your swimmers to test them and see where they fall. The coaches I talk to usually are like, yeah, Chris, we didn't even make it to 2 minutes. We're like flaming out at 1.5 minutes. Well, here's the thing. If they can't pass that 2.5 minute test, I would term their core as extremely poor. We need to work on that. Like, 3 is not, let's throw a celebration. 3 is like, okay, check. We can move on now to other things. It's not like some Mount Everest accomplishment. So making sure you just even have this, a very simple test you can do in under 3 minutes to understand, where do the athletes in my group fall? Where are they? Are they level 1 or level 2, or level 3? And then more importantly, understanding, what do you do with those level 1 and 2 swimmers? Obviously the level 3, you're good, right? You check the box. We can now move on to maybe some more advanced bracing exercises. But the level 1 and 2, how do you get them to that 2.5 minutes? It's almost like, if you can't do a pull-up, how do you get a kid to their first pull-up? It seems like a chasm to try to reach that. Well, we make sure that you understand how to build up not only the brace category, but any of the movement categories, especially if you have swimmers stuck in these levels 1 and 2. Now, also, the other thing I want you to hear me too is, just because they're level 1 or 2 swimmers, they can still be really fast. It's just on dry land, they're going to be at more remedial exercises. And that's the appropriate level to challenge them. So not only have we divided exercise up into categories, but now we have even divided them up into levels, and we give you the exact tests to run on your swimmers. So then you can see what level are your swimmers at. Because if a swimmer cannot do that bridge test for 2.5 minutes, there's no way they're going to be doing a kneeling rollout on an ab wheel with good technique. They might be able to eke out 1 or 2 reps, a la you think back to me doing my bench press and having my shoulder pop every rep, but it's not going to be good for them in the long term. Something more like a stir the pot with a stability ball. So we break it down for you for those level 1 and 2 swimmers. Here's progressions that you go through. We start with this 1-to-1 work to rest ratio of building up how long can you hold a bridge. Then we work on alternating bridges. Then we work on opposite bridges. And soon enough, they're going to pass that 2.5-minute test. And boom, you can now do more advanced bracing exercises with them and continue to build up their natural supersuit. And we even give you accessory exercise in terms of, all right, here's your list. Again, go back to the function solutions. Which one is going to work best for you? Pick which is best for your environment. Maybe you don't have stability balls. Maybe you don't have a TRX. Maybe you just have body weight. All right, let's do hollow. And here's just an example from our exercise library of the body saw with TRX. Now, again, if we're trying to build a swimmer up to get that 2.5-minute bridge test checked, this may not look very advanced, especially for someone that can pass the test, but for someone that can't, this can be real hard, especially to hold their line back and forth as they're moving the center of axis along that resistance. So most of your swimmers are probably going to look like that. They're probably going to need some help, but we're going to give you the steps to build them from that rubber raft to the kayak, because you can have an experience like Ann, where that's probably the worst situation I can think of in terms of, all right, coach, you're going to deal with 12, 10 and unders via Zoom. We're not going to be in the pool for 3 weeks. Get them better. What do? Ann figured it out because she just followed the steps that we laid out in the Surge Strength Dryland certification. So all this to say, this comes back to, I think a core component of why kids aren't engaged in Dryland is because you're not reaching them at the appropriate level. Either the challenge is too high over their head and the kid's like, yeah, coach, I'm not going to be able to do that. You know, we talk about being able to pass the bridge combo test in order to do the kneeling rollout on the wheel. And if kids can't do that, they're already going to intrinsically know, I can't do that exercise. It's not going to work out well for me. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe you go back to like what Jim was saying, where I was afraid to hurt them. I was afraid to challenge them too much. And maybe you have some really good athletes in your group and you're not challenging them appropriately. And maybe because you're trying to do that, I don't want to do any harm first, but you don't know because you haven't tested them what level you can appropriately challenge them. So I say, if your kids are not engaged in Dryland, more often than not, it's because they're not understanding the process. But then the coach reads that as, oh, they're not engaged. I need to do variety. I need to do lots of different things. I need to change it up all the time. That's probably the worst thing you could do, especially for a level 1 or 2 swimmer to progress up to level 3. They don't need a different thing every single day. They just need to get better at holding that bridge for 2.5 minutes. They need to follow a simple progression. But if you as a coach don't know how to explain that to your swimmers, they don't hear that. They're going to think, oh, I'm just bored at Dryland. I want something else to do. So variety in Dryland programming is actually a byproduct. It's not a goal. It's the byproduct of a well-planned Dryland program, because you're going to be changing variables. There are actually 8 different variables that you can change in a Dryland workout. I think most coaches only think of 1 or 2. They either think, what's the weight or what's the reps? There's so many more variables that you can change. And when you change these variables, I'm not saying change every single variable every time. It's very similar to a swim workout, or as that you're planning your swim season. You're not going to be changing your intervals that you're sending the kids off, or the volume. It's not going to be going up and down crazy amounts. You could change a couple things this week and then hold steady on some others. And then we're going to change 1 or 2 things next week and then hold steady. Having a plan and just understanding, I can just pull these levers here and have these level 1 and 2 kids. I need to get them up to that 2.5-minute bridge combo test. So then we can kind of check off that. We can build their natural supersuit. But if you as a coach are hearing, oh, the swimmers aren't engaged, I can understand why you start to go every which way with variety. And that's just going to leave you with disappointment, frustration. Swimmers are too. Here's a coach up in Canada, Luis. He's a great coach. He was actually a really good swimmer himself and was coached by really, great coaches. So he had the privilege of having that as his experience coming up in the sport. But for him, the light bulb moment as he was going through our curriculum to be Dryland certified was this levels concept, in understanding like, oh, hey, I thought originally I shouldn't be doing push-ups with 8-year-olds, but now I understand that if I do these tests and I see where my swimmers lie and what level they are, I can now match the appropriate exercises to where my swimmers are currently at. And that turns out to be the best for everyone, because now you're engaging the athletes at the appropriate and safe level, because safety is going to come from challenging the athletes at the level they're currently at, not the level you wish they were. Or for some of your higher level athletes, you're under challenging them right now because you're afraid to hurt them. And I appreciate that you don't want to hurt them, but having tests to send them through, and for you as a coach to know, okay, we have the green light. We can go harder on this. We can go at this intensity because they've proven this. That's going to give you confidence as a coach. And it's probably going to lead to better output from those swimmers because they probably want to be challenged. They want to go to the next thing. So I know we've been going through a lot. I've been going through at a fast pace. We got one more to go through on the effective. And I've seen some questions being thrown in the Q&A. So keep it up as we're going through. We'll get to all the questions then. I'm going to take 1 second for a drink here. So we talked about safety. We talked about how to engage swimmers. How do we get results? How do we actually have an effective program? What does that even look like? And I know for some that seems very daunting. We've tried to make it very simple. And simple doesn't mean easy necessarily, but simple in terms of here's a process you go through. So we break down how to write a season Dryland plan, a weekly Dryland plan, and the individual daily session Dryland plan all in the curriculum. Here's the actual checklist for the session plan. The craziest thing is none of these things are mind-blowing, like, oh, what type of Dryland session? How much space do we have? But if you just have a process to go through, it's going to help you get through it so much easier. So if you think, okay, what's today's purpose? Pick one. And again, there's no right answer at this point, but it's what's your situation right now. Maybe you're going to do a strength session. Maybe you've had a really hard week of training and you just want to do an unload or a stretching and mobility session. It doesn't matter. We have a process that will fit whatever your environment or situation is currently. Then the other thing, how many athletes are you dealing with? What's the number of space? What's the equipment? So when you start to break down these variables into smaller chunks, by the time we get to writing the actual workout, it's only going to take you minutes. Whereas if you haven't checked off any of these variables or haven't thought about them, it's going to be overwhelming for you each time to have to write a Dryland workout. Here's the real thing. I think most coaches don't think about the sweet spot of how many exercises in a circuit. We recommend 3 to 6, and I actually love 5 because 5, we can hit one of each movement category, the hinge, push, squat, pull, and brace. And I actually prefer a alignment like that because not only are we alternating pushing and pulling, squatting, and hinging, but also upper and lower body. So you get more of an aerobic effect even as well. If you go from a lower body exercise to an upper body exercise. So now, if we've already checked off what's the movement session or what type of session is it, and then what are the other variables? How many athletes, space, equipment? Now we get to pretty easy. You could just look at the sheets that we've provided you in the curriculum of, all right, what level of athlete do I have? What are the exercises? And then it's just a plug and play thing. So now in just a few minutes, I have a very effective Dryland workout done. And it didn't take a lot of work. I just had to go work through a process. If you don't take the time to do these performance tests, to do the movement assessment tests to make sure your swimmers are safe, it's always going to feel like work to put together these Dryland programs. So we've put together these resources to help you be more effective, engage your athletes, make sure they're safe, and improve. Now, in writing the workouts, there's one real kind of secret that I wanted to share with you and sneak it in onto the webinar tonight about programming. And it was on the checklist. So I don't know how much you were glancing through all of those things that you need to go through to write an individual Dryland workout. But here's the one secret, if you will, is identifying your ratios, push to pull, squat to hinge. So upper body, we got pulling movements and we got pushing movements. We want those to be equal, 1-to-1 in terms of the overall volume, whether it's a day or a week, not much more than a week, but somewhere between a day and a week, you want them pretty even. Now, even better, if you can go a little bit more towards pulling, a little bit more towards hinging. And the reason is, if you remember that math slide where I talked about how many rotations, a swimmer is going through with their shoulders, they're swimming up and down the pool. I would rather have more pulling exercises than pushing, because that's going to help posturally keep the swimmer as tall as possible, not get those hunched over shoulders, and also strengthen muscles that don't really get hit a lot in swimming. So 1-to-1 is great, but if anything, I try to go a little bit more 1-to-2 and more on the pulling and the hinging. Now that may seem like, okay, Chris, now you're really throwing me for a loop. There's so much stuff to think about. I'm going to show you how simple this is. So if this is our workout that we went through the steps, we got 2 5-exercise circuits. Right now we have a 1-to-1 ratio on push, pull, squat, and a hinge. You can see our first circuit here. We got a hinge, we got a push, we got a squat, we got a pull, we got a brace exercise. Same pattern for the other circuit as well. So we have 2 circuits, 5 exercises. All I have to do is substitute out 2 exercises, and it moves the ratio from a 1-to-1 to a 1-to-2. So I'll show you that again. All I'm changing is the second and third exercise of the first circuit. So here's the 1-to-1 example. Here's the 1-to-2. All we did is we put a row and we put a single leg bridge. That's not that complicated. But if you don't know what are the small things to adjust, I can see why coaches go off the deep end literally and don't really get great results, don't get engagement, or their swimmers are getting injured. So it's just these little things that can unlock so much potential when you do Dryland appropriately. I think of Sarah, who just recently became Surge Strength Dryland certified, earning those SSDC credentials. And she talked about, when I had her on the Surge Strength podcast, this light bulb moment about ratios. And this is a coach too, like some of you maybe. She tried to go get other strength and conditioning certifications. She went and found more information on her own, but it still left her wanting more, especially when it came back to swimming. She had all these personal training, other certifications. She had never heard about ratios. She had never thought, oh, that's a huge thing to think about when we talk about swimming specific programming. How do you do Dryland well as opposed to every other sport? So these are the things that we can really shine a light on. And the other thing that happens too, funny enough, is, so we talked about the assessments, the testing, and the ability to individualize group training. So as crazy as it sounds, and I've done this both in helping other coaches do it and personally, if you have a group of 30 kids, there's absolutely still a way you can individualize their training without you having to spend 5 hours a day on their Dryland workout or feel like you're pulling out your hair during the Dryland workout as well. If you follow the levels, if you just slot it in, and then you see, oh, Jimmy's coming over to the pull-ups, but he can't do pull-ups, or his shoulder, we're still working on the mobility part. He's still a little bit weak. It could be any number of things. You just slot an exercise down a level. So instead of level 3 or 2, he's now to level 2 or 1. It can really be that simple for you as a coach to individualize group training. And when you're able to use the levels to understand what function solutions your swimmers need based on their movement assessments, and then you can engage them with your coaching and they start to see the results, that's where the magic starts to happen with Dryland. And we go back to Anne now, where I appreciate that she was able to just, talk about it as candidly as this, but she was literally getting Dryland workouts off of Pinterest. And she's like, oh yeah, that's why I kept getting hurt, or my swimmers were kind of getting injured, I was just leaving it up to chance here, scrolling through social media, trying to pick what worked. But now she has a system, she has a process to go through in Dryland to get the results. Kelly, another person that has extensive credentials, personal training, strength and conditioning, but she is still wanting more for swimming specific. And that's what she found when she was earning her SSDC credentials. So you could see how if you go through these checklists and this process, you can get effective Dryland programming, which leads to actually results from the program that you're doing. So now we have the trifecta. We have safe, engaging, and effective Dryland programming. So I've thrown a ton at you. So we got to take a deep breath. I'm actually going to take a drink while you take a deep breath. So here's kind of the thing you have to think about. Are you going to let your old habits keep you from experiencing the potential that Dryland has? Just a few tweaks. We go back to that workout where I just changed 2 exercises and the whole workout changes. We're now in much better ratios. And I had this picture specifically because if you don't think there's anything wrong with this picture, you really need to understand why there's much better ways to go about dealing with shoulder stretches, health, and strength. So my challenge to you is, again, you took the time to show up here to commit a Sunday night to hear about me talk about Dryland. Do you want a new process in how you're going about Dryland training? And it really comes down to 3 choices. You could have pleaded ignorance before, but now you can't. But you can do nothing still. That's a choice. Another one is you can do it alone. And I feel like a lot of coaches this last year were doing it alone. I could think of Ann on the Zooms. I mean, if she didn't have the SSDC, I'm sure it would have been so much more stressful and difficult and not nearly the results. So you can still try to piece it together on your own, or you can let me help you. And it really comes down to those 3 choices after tonight. You can continue to do nothing, not really change anything after I've tried to talk to you about some things. You could try to just go it on your own, or let me help you by enrolling and joining these other coaches to become SSDC. I'm going to show you what that looks like a little bit more. So we've broken up the curriculum into 2 sections. Each have 4 modules. The first module is all about the foundations. What's the knowledge that you need about Dryland overview, movements, exercises, principles of strength and conditioning, periodization. And so we talk much more in depth of what does Dryland actually look like? Why do we do it? What are all the components that are in Dryland? Is it with weights? Is it without? Is it on the pool deck, in the weight room? Is it for 12 and unders? Is it for high schoolers? All of that stuff we cover in the first module. That's just the first module. Then the second module, we dive all into thousands of exercises. We categorize them, and then we put them into levels. So now you have a grid as a coach. You can move through and you can say, all right, I got a really high level athlete. He's going to be a little bit higher levels. And some athletes aren't all at the same level for all of their movement categories as well. You're going to understand how to progress, regress, and move athletes through to get them better, whether it's working on their natural tech suit or doing their first pull-up. Then we talk about the tried and true principles of strength and conditioning. And these haven't changed in 50, 100 years. It's just the methods and how we implement them, and specifically for swimming performance. Then periodization. I developed a whole module just to this because I feel some coaches, they either go all in and down this rabbit hole of all this information they don't need, or they don't worry about it all. They just say, periodization, I do it in the pool. I don't need to do it on dry land. That's a mistake. So we have a whole module just about how to do periodization through a season. So that just lays the foundation knowledge. Now we get specific in terms of the last 4 modules. It's all about applying this knowledge. I'm not about just giving you knowledge for knowledge's sake. I want to give you knowledge and then let you use it and apply it. So we have a whole module breaking down the movement assessments and performance tests that I just briefly mentioned, and the solutions and how you then, okay, my swimmer scored this on the performance test, so he's going to be this level in the movement category. How much easier does that make it for you as a coach to write their Dryland program? And that's actually what the next module is. Module 6, I go through tons of examples on that, even training specificity and equipment. So we talked about this a little bit, and I'm a little bit behind on my presentation. I'm going to keep going through to be respectful of your time. But the training specificity, this is really where the curriculum is at the apex in terms of we work on all this point to get you all this knowledge, start to figure out how to put together the program, but then we make it very swimming specific. And coach after coach, especially those that have already tried to get other certifications that were just generic training certifications, we're still very much lacking. How do I make this swimming specific? How do I actually relate it to this swimmer getting their hands on the wall before the other competitor or before their personal best time to get a new personal best? And then the last module is all about equipment, because I feel some coaches are just overwhelmed. Maybe they think they need a lot bigger budget than they really do. So we break down what are the different types of budgets. So if you have a really minimal budget, minimal to zero budget, here's what you should get. Here's the first piece or 2 of equipment. Maybe you have a pretty good sized budget. You just don't know what to spend it on. I make sure I show you how to start to put together a budget for Dryland equipment, so then you can have a full program for your swimmers. And the way we built the curriculum is for any type of learner. The coolest thing for me is we have so many coaches and swimmers where English is their second language. So they are able to use the videos that we have as captions. They sometimes can even print out transcripts if it's easier for them to read English than it is to listen. You can also have variable play, speed play on the video. So if you want to get through it a little bit faster, we have slides and outlines for you to print out, even a roadmap for you to print out here to check off and follow your progress as you go through. We give you support with group Zoom study calls led by me. And then it's also always self-paced. So you can go as fast or as take your time as much as you need. There's knowledge checks along the way to make sure you're retaining the information, and even really innovative search tools where you can literally type in one word I have said and it will search all the videos in the entire course and take you to that exact second. Saves you a lot of time when you are trying to review. So who is this for? Are you not sure if it's for you? You're still not sure? Swim coaches, age group, senior, high school, college, even national and federation coaches. Here's just an example of some of the teams that have at least one or their whole staff through this. You could see there's historically successful clubs. There's national federations there. There's even clubs from my home state of Oregon, clubs from on the other side of the world, and then clubs that are right down the street from me. Coaches that are even having their whole staff on board just say, we are committing to Dryland. Guys, we haven't even been around for a year with this certification, and it's still going. This is how many clubs we have had already have at least one or their whole staff go through and are currently working or have become SSDC. So the question is, what happens if just one of your coaches becomes it on staff? Think about the change that would happen if just one committed to that. I think about a coach like Eric up in Ohio. He's been following us for years, probably almost as long as Ritter's been around. But when we first came out with this certification less than a year ago, he thought, this is the solution. This is how I get my whole staff on the same terminology, on the same page, how we can move kids from group to group all the way through the program. Because Eric knew Dryland had a place. It's not like I had to convince him about Dryland. He already knew. I almost feel like the same situation as Jim earlier, where Jim knew Dryland was important, but it's almost like, I'm not sure if I should do that. I'm not sure how to approach this situation. And now Eric's had most of his staff go through or working through becoming SSDC and to put the piece of Dryland together. Go back to Jim, talking about becoming SSDC helped the burden just come off of his shoulders when it came to Dryland training, not worrying about his kids getting hurt and making sure they were going to get results. It's even great for masters and self-coach swimmers. I know we don't have a ton in the audience, but I did see some that answered the poll saying they were a swimmer. Here's Peter. He's both a master swimmer and a coach. So self-coaching, he really relied on this program, becoming SSDC, and he's still working through, but even though he's not all the way through, he's still learning a lot of stuff that he can apply and see results both for himself and then also the master swimmers that he's coaching. And we've already had a couple coaches where they fall into this category where they have strength and conditioning certifications, personal training certifications, other performance coaches. Here's a local coach, actually, John, he's just down the road. He has so much experience. He's been in the fitness industry over 20 years. And recently, in the last 5-10 years, I think, he's been working more with swimmers. And again, he's searching, where's something more? I got all these initials behind my name, but I still don't know how to make it swimming specific. He went through, blazed through, and he said, this is an amazing certification. And he's taken almost all of them in the strength and conditioning world. And he said, this is amazing. It'll bring you value and be swimming specific. Think about a guy over in the Middle East. And he actually teaches this stuff at a university. He has all his friends will ask him for exercises, Dryland help. And even he's not even all the way through, getting through the first module or two. He's like, how the hell did I not think about this? This is so easy. I need to do this. So sometimes it's not a lack of your background knowledge or education. It's just pointing out a few simple things sometimes that can make all the difference. I know we have some of the audience to answer the poll. You're falling in this line of rehabilitation or healthcare providers. Here's Josh, again, not even through being certified. He is an athletic trainer way above my level in terms of education. You know, he can diagnose if an ACL has been torn. I don't even know where to start with that. Even he was already learning stuff before he finished module 1. He wasn't even into the meat of the curriculum yet. And he's already understanding man, I can apply this to my swimmers. This is a light bulb moment. I can help do this. Now, that was who it's for. Who is this not for? Because I want to be very honest. We're not just out here to try to make money. We want to make sure the right people are getting on this bus, and the wrong people, wait for another bus, or I don't know, go to another stop. Tire kicker. If you're just kind of thinking half-hearted, half committed, this is not for you. Don't worry about it. Okay. Here's the biggest one I would say. Those of you that are seeking magic results. Okay. If I was a magician, I would be charging a lot more for this course. I guarantee you that. But it's not magic. It's just stuff that I have seen what's worked. I've continued to evolve the system throughout the years. I see how it works with coaches in different environments. It's not magic. I'm not claiming it on any level. So if you're looking for that, go check out something else. And lastly, it is not for someone if you know it all. Now, I'm assuming that's almost nobody in this audience because, again, you took the time out of your Sunday night to listen to me on a webinar. So I'm assuming that's not most of you, but it's not for the know-it-alls. So again, going back to the 3 choices, do nothing, go it alone, let me help you. I've found a quicker, more effective way to do Dryland that's not going to be stressful for you. And I want you to experience how much game-changing this can be, not just in the Dryland performance, but it comes down to what happens in the pool, right? I'm not training Olympic weightlifters. I'm training swimmers to be better athletes, to be faster swimmers. One of those in particular, so much fun working with him, Cullen Jones. He was doing pull-ups with 80 pounds, and we made sure he was the fittest he had ever felt going into the Beijing Olympics. And honestly, a lot of people didn't even think he was going to make that 08 team, and he surprised some people getting on that relay. I have to feel Dryland played some part in that. Think about Mark Gangloff, another Olympian from the 2008 team I had the pleasure to work with, who's now the head coach at UNC and really turning that program around. I got to go see what he's doing about 2 years ago now. And man, they're getting some stuff clicking. Watch out for them. But he's a super specific, very diligent. When he was a swimmer, I knew he was going to be a great coach. And being able to work with him and figure out, all right, you're just going for the 100 breaststroke. He's not going for the 200. It's just the 100. It's all or nothing on that. How specific we could make that program so he could make yet another Olympic team and get yet another gold medal. And then we go to more quote unquote everyday examples of coaches are saying, gosh, this is amazing stuff. The most comprehensive I've ever seen. The swimming community needs this. Again, guys, we haven't even been certifying people, I would say really about 6 months, not even a year. But coaches are saying how recommended they would to other coaches that they enroll. And this is the kind of comment I love. So we talk about quote unquote the gold standard in strength and conditioning, which I was a part of for a long time, the CSCS. We have a coach who's not only CSCS, but her master's in strength and conditioning, and she cannot recommend becoming SSDC highly enough. And it's because if you are looking for swimming specific stuff, we are starting to prove there's nothing better out there. So the value for the modules for the Surge Strength Dryland certification, $499. What you also get with that is coaching with me via those Zoom calls, making sure you're understanding the material as we're laying it out. And here's just some more reviews from the course. And guys, at this point, we have yet to have anything less than a 5-star review. And we've had hundreds of people go through and either currently working or become SSDC. So that's pretty awesome to me that we are holding a 5.0 average for the reviews. But talking about Dryland deserves the same type of effort as your swimming. Don't do injustice by your athletes. This is what we also include too, is an exercise video library where we break down all the exercises. There are coaching cues with every video, and then you can put that into your program. I'm going to give you all the templates to easily make a seasoned, weekly, daily Dryland workout. And as Jim talked about, that was game changing for him to just use those tools, be able to put it all together. Because before, if he didn't have something just as simple as a template, it was so much harder to put the Dryland workouts together. But you just have a couple templates now, a couple processes, checklists to go through. It's going to make it so much easier, more effective, and safer for your athletes. Then we have the programming checklist I was already talking about a little bit. Going back to Sarah, again, multiple personal training certifications, not bagging on Sarah at all, but she just didn't understand about the ratios are being so important for swimming because every other certification out there isn't specific to swimming. So the ratios don't matter as much in other sports, but in swimming, it's a huge deal for shoulder health to make sure there's more pulling than pushing, or at least an equal amount. Periodization. We break down the phases you need to concentrate on for periodizing dryland programming, but not go down a rabbit hole of a bunch more complexity that you don't really need at this point. Going back to Anne, she talked about these templates just made it so much easier that she knows what to do now. We also give you all the templates, all the spreadsheets, the score sheets for the movement assessments and performance tests. And then going back to Guy, he talked about, he just did this in a day or two. He saw with his swimmers, he knew immediately what to start having them work on. Think about that. If you enrolled, you then now have access to this tool you could put into use tomorrow at your next practice. Start giving your kids function solutions that they can start helping, especially with shoulders or anything else, to make sure they're not going to miss practice and achieve their potential athletically and in the water. I even give you the standards for both age groupers and senior swimmers of what we want them to hit on dry land, because they are different. For the 12 and unders, it's kind of one category. For 13 and overs, it's another category. So what are those categories? What are the goals you're searching for? We know what Olympic trials cuts are, but you don't know what dryland cuts are. That might help if you know what the dryland cuts are to get your swimmers to that. I'm also going to give you routines for warm up and how to avoid injuries. Here's one that's been really helpful the last year. You talk about no water time, and I know a lot of teams have had to deal with that. How do you still get aerobically fit if dryland is your only option, if you don't have water time? We give you templates on how to do that. And then finally, I've mentioned this before, the equipment recommendations. Here's the biggest one I think is so helpful. And it took me a long time to put this together in the curriculum too, going back a decade plus of my coaching. The case studies. So I'm going to give you case studies on not only 10 and unders, 11 to 13, 14-year-olds, seniors, college, and 3 different movement assessments and performance tests. So swimmer A scored this. What do you do? I walk you through that whole process, not once, but twice, but 3 times, so you can see how it plays out in different scenarios. I'm basically giving you the answers before you even implement the test. This is really what's going to help you, is those case studies. So there's no more excuses to not have results-based dryland. Again, going through more coaches that are either working their way through or already SSDC. And again, the level of recommendation that this course is getting from other people that know their stuff in terms of exercise science, personal training certifications, that's what really makes me proud of what we've put together. So one more time from Jim, talking about learning a system that's going to give you the flexibility and approach. Think about what your team could do. Again, if just one coach, let alone all the coaches on staff, got their SSDC credentials and started putting it to use. So what's learning a new process worth to you? What's it worth to your athletes? I don't really think there is a number particularly for it, but I will add up the value of what is in not only the certification, curriculum, the modules, but all the other stuff that we have put together. So that's the total value of what we could charge for this. So you can see why it would be a deal if we had it at $1,000, but that's not even what we are charging for that. Think about, what would it be worth to you if you could create a dryland program that is so diverse, you could match 30 kids in a group to their appropriate level and see them challenged appropriately and improve, no matter if they can't even do a bridge for 30 seconds or they can do that for 10 minutes. That's the power and the information, knowledge, and the system that we can give you when you enroll to become SSDC. It's just like Jim says, $500. And think about this, if you invest in your coaches, they're going to stick around longer. They're going to enjoy themselves more because they're getting better results with their athletes. The athletes are going to be happier. The parents are going to be happier. It just all works. And it's as little as enrolling to become SSDC. Get your whole staff on. If you're a head coach, you should be thinking about this. Think about what Eric's done. Jim talked about too. I mean, getting the whole staff on the same page and being able to use the same terminology to take a kid from when they're 8 and under all the way up through a senior in high school and hopefully swim in college and have that experience. That's what this can do for your staff. So it's just $4.99 to enroll. I know it's crazy at the all the stuff we have packed in. I'm almost rethinking we need to change the price right now. But I know one more thing. If you enroll tonight, this is what else I'm going to add to this. You will get the exact Dryland program that Colin and Mark Gangloff were doing leading up to Beijing. No extra costs. We're throwing that in. We're also going to go on not 1, 2, but 3 year-long Dryland programs already done for you. You could straight just print them off and do them, and they're going to be great. That's how lazy you could be if you wanted and still get great results. And we're doing it at beginner and intermediate levels, and even a year-long program if you had no minimal equipment. I'm also going to make sure you are in all the Zoom Dryland study calls as well. As you're going through the curriculum, if you have any questions that come up, I'm going to answer them personally for you to make sure you're understanding all of the material we're presenting. So again, it's just $4.99 to enter. Here's Corrine. We haven't heard from Corrine yet. She's up in Alaska. It's still really cold there. I was just seeing a post from her that birds are starting to come out. They had a big shutdown. Then when I talked to her on the Surge Strength podcast, they were back in the water for just a few weeks. They had an inter squad meet just to see where the kids are at. Almost every single kid had a personal best. And she feels it's because they didn't stop doing Dryland, even though they were out of the water. Now, some of you got kids going to Olympic trials. It's less than 50 days. I'm so excited. I got my tickets. I'm going to be pumped, ready to go. I predict we are going to see incredible times in 50 days. I was saying it more than a year ago when the shutdown first started. I said, we don't know how long this is going to last. I don't know. I'm not a virologist, not a doctor. I'm not a politician, anything. But I will tell you this. I don't want you to look back a year from now and regret missing the time and the opportunity. And we're already seeing the last year, some coaches really dove into Dryland and it is paying off in spades. Others, they were going it alone. They were trying to piece it together. All right, maybe they got some results, maybe they didn't. But I guarantee you, Olympic trials, mark my words, and the Olympics, you're going to see the best swimmers that succeed. When the stories come out, it's going to be Dryland is what gave me the edge this past year. So I encourage you, stop winging it. Don't leave it up to chance anymore. What if you had peace around what you're doing? What if you had confidence, like, kind of like sigh, like, yeah, I got this. What if you were actually excited and motivated about Dryland and about how to talk to swimmers in a new way about Dryland? What if Dryland was fun again and your kids loved Dryland? Even doing Zoom Dryland with 10-year-old. Anne's my hero at this point. All the stuff she's been able to accomplish with the knowledge we've given her through the SSDC curriculum. So as I see these words here, confidence, peace, fun, motivated, excited, results, do these reflect what you feel about your Dryland program right now? Do you feel good about the knowledge that you have? Or are you just kind of winging it and feel like, oh, well, maybe I'm kind of motivated some days, or maybe we have fun every now and then. I definitely don't feel peace about my Dryland program. I'm kind of crossing my fingers, hope no one gets hurt. The difference is if you enroll to become SSDC, you can say all these things are how I feel about my Dryland, and the results are going to come. And they're probably going to come quicker than you think. So I wanted to show you a video here. I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to share one more thing here. Give me 1 second as I switch over. All right, guys.
I wanted something that I felt like was geared towards swimming.
Took my personal training and it was good, but then it still didn't give me that edge of, okay, I'm going to have to do the extra research to understand exactly how this applies to swimming.
I think that a swim coach that only knows how to swim coach then doesn't know anything.
I think I'm probably similar to a lot of coaches out there. We just run out of time at some point. By the time I want to teach all of this to all of my staff, I can't do that and run a practice and create workouts and do all of those other things.
You can't blame your coaches when they're doing the wrong things in Dryland or the wrong things in the water. When you don't want to invest in your coaches.
Oh, well, that's why I kept getting hurt. I was totally doing that out of context.
You just have to keep on learning all the time, even though you have the knowledge. You have to keep on hearing other people talk about it and seeing their point of view.
There's an abundance of knowledge in here which will make you feel more grounded and more knowledgeable. You'll feel a lot more confident in being able to deliver something like this and put it together.
It's a comfort level of knowing I've got my parameters of where I need to be and what I need them to achieve. And then you've got a whole bunch of resources as well to kind of build that.
So the process of learning surge strength is a huge value use of my time.
There's accessibility, you have great Q&A sessions and follow-up sessions that they don't have to come to me just for those questions. That you're an immediate resource, and it's a well laid out program that takes away a lot of the initial questions that they have when they come to me anyway.
You'd already laid out the map for me. I didn't need to figure it out.
I mean, the $500 to certify them in something, or the $50 to certify them in something for 1 year of coaching. You know, if you do that every year, you spend $500 a year to make sure that your kids don't get hurt and the staff is a higher quality. And the other thing I found is as you invest in your coaches, they stick around longer.
If you're certified in something, you should probably have put some time and effort into it to really learn it. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend the Surge program for any coach that's running Dryland.
I absolutely recommend.
I would promote the program without a doubt. Anybody that asks, I go ahead and share your information with them and tell them that start here. And I think it's been a huge asset for our program overall, so thank you.
All right, guys. So I want to share another screen and show you guys how to actually go about enrolling. And crazy stuff, we already have multiple coaches that have enrolled. Charles from Utah and Stanley from California. You guys are top of the class. Oh, whoops. So you go to surgestrength.com, you click Academy, you're going to scroll down here. And Jason, you can put the link in the chat as well. Go ahead and turn that back on. So you're going to click Become Surge Strength Dryland Certified. Here's the information page. And honestly, we've gone through almost all of this already, but you can feel free to scan. You can enroll now, click down. And I did not mention this before. This course will get you professional continuing education units from USA Triathlon. We just got approved for NASM, NASM, AFAAA, and then also we're still waiting on ISSA. So there's a lot of initials. Some of you know immediately, if it rings a bell. This will get CEUs for you. And enrollment is only going to be open for 4 days, guys. So click enroll here. It's going to come to this page. You're going to have a few options. So Become SSDC, that gets you in. Then you have an option to get, if you want to book a private one-on-one call with me, either 30, 60 minutes or none, not a problem. So you're going to want to add that to cart after you do your options. And then I'm going to show you one more thing you might want to go back and get. There's the graduate level. So the graduate level, we have not started yet. We will be starting in the next few weeks. And what that is, it's only for people that have earned their SSDC, but we're going to give it to you at a discount rate. So you can see right now, you're going to save $50 if you enroll. And so if you're going to get through the certification, you feel like in the next month or two, I would go ahead and do it. What it's going to be is continual office hours, program evaluation, a bunch of other resources with me. So again, that's optional if you want to get the Graduate Academy. You're going to fill out all your details, complete purchase, and then you're going to check your email after you complete your purchase. That is going to give you a receipt, and you'll be able to click there, start my course, and go right through there. When you click that, it's going to bring you to your account page here, and you're going to click courses, and then you're going to see the certification here. And I've already started a little bit as I'm going through. So it saves your progress. So you can see where you're at. You could continue right off from where I left, but I just wanted to show you a little bit more of the modules, how we put it together. So an introduction, we make sure you know how to navigate through the certification. I know I have bought in courses or certifications sometimes. And when time I got to the backside, I was so frustrated. It wasn't user-friendly. We have taken a lot of feedback from all the coaches that have gone through so far and tried to make it as user-friendly as possible and to give you the best position to be successful. So there's a kind of a mini introduction module before we actually get to the modules I talked about, 1 through 8. And then there's the final at the end there. And then you can become SSDC. So Jason, if you threw that in the chat there of where people to go, if you haven't already, I'd appreciate that. I will put it on the screen as well.
It is in the chat twice. I can
awesome. And then, oops, I hit the wrong thing. And then I'm ready for Q&A whenever you are.
I am ready. We're going to be, we have like 20 questions. We have
awesome.
15
I love
a minute
it.
ago.
I love it. Hey, I just refilled the water bottle while that video was playing. I'm good to go, guys. Let's go.
Okay, good. If there's anything you can't get to tonight, or you have questions after we answer them, you can email me at jason@RitterSP tonight or tomorrow, and you could set up a phone call with me anytime this week. But we will get to questions for Chris right now. How long should you spend on Dryland if you have a 2-hour practice session?
I'm assuming they're saying water and land on that practice.
Correct.
You think correct, Jason? Yeah. So if it's kind of hard to know if I don't know your whole week or your whole season, but here's what I will say. If all you did was Dryland for 15 or 20 minutes as either a warm-up, or maybe you did get into some strength work in that 15, 20 minutes, which is possible if you really know what you're doing and you put together a Chris Dryland program, even that can be really effective. And I'm not sure if it's the underlying tone of the question, but I feel some coaches feel, Jason, that they need a lot more time on Dryland to be effective than is really required. And it all comes back to how you're programming and how you're writing. I could create a really effective 15, 20-minute Dryland session if that's all I had, because we know water time is precious. We're talking about swimmers here, not Olympic weightlifters. And so I'm not asking you to sacrifice a lot of water time, but even 15, 20 minutes, if it allows, if I can get an hour a few times a week, I would like that. But even if I can't, if I can get 30 minutes a few, I can make a program work with that, no doubt.
Okay, next question.
Hey, Todd from Utah enrolling. Awesome. So we got Charles from Utah, Todd from Utah, Stanley from California. Awesome, guys. Way to make the commitment.
All right, I really like this one. If you have a CSCS or another certification, why get an SSDC? Is it repetitive knowledge gained through the other certs?
Absolutely not. And I will go show you. Josh, I'm pretty sure, has a CSCS. Sarah has her CSCS. Corrine has her CSCS. I already saw another testimony up there. No, and what I was hearing, honestly, from the people that had their CSCS is that gave me a good, and I mean, I got my CS way long time ago, but as soon as I graduated college, I was able to get it. So I understand what they're presenting there. And I understand the frustration of swim coaches when they go get their CSCS and they're like, okay, how do I help my swimmers now? And that's what, like Sarah was talking about, of having this piece of like, now I know what to do. Oh, it's the ratios I got to worry about. Like none of that stuff you ever hear about in other certifications. I've taken almost all of them, guys. And when I sat down to actually do this project almost a year ago, a little bit more, I really wanted to make sure that I was talking to swim coaches that didn't necessarily have an exercise background, that we wouldn't go over their head, they could give them knowledge, but then also the people that were in the strength and conditioning field that had other advanced certifications, we could talk specifically about this is how you get swimmers actually faster. Now, you know, other certifications, they're not going to teach quote unquote bad periodization, but it's not specific and it's not framed in a way of, hey, this is what else your athletes are dealing with in the water. And that's something I think a lot of strength coaches are appreciating too, as they're going through. Oh, I think John's another one. So just off the top of my head, 5 people off the top of my head, just from some of the testimonials we picked out, already have other degrees like that. And they would say, man, this was so valuable to enroll in that. I forget the one, if I can scroll back, Jason, and find the one, where was it? Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah. So again, master's in exercise science, way more, and CSCS, and she still can't recommend it highly enough. So yeah, it's not repetitive at all. If anything, I think if you had another certification, it's almost like a double layer of the foundational knowledge, but you don't have any of module 5, 6, 7, 8, where we actually get into the applications and the practicality of what does this look like. Jason, before the next question, I just got a ping that we have more coaches already enrolling. Mary Elizabeth from Virginia, Heather from DC, Alberto from the UK, first international one for tonight. Awesome. Alberto. All right. What other questions we got, Jason?
Okay. They're growing, so be ready. Much like sprinters and track, swimming has its own sprinters. What is your view on training for power in the weight room or during Dryland? How often, periodization, and specifically for college swimmers?
I appreciate that you're trying to go to the end, right? Like, what do I want to see out of it? I want power off the blocks. I want power off the walls, especially college. I mean, it's all about the walls and starts, right, Jason? I mean, you know that as a
100%.
former college coach. But the problem is, if you don't understand principles of strength conditioning, periodization, power can only be increased as much as the base is wide for strength. And so there's this balance of we have to get them strong. And as we get them strong, it raises the ceiling that we can then turn into power, or a distance swimmer we want to turn into more endurance. But if you neglect strength and just jump to power, what happens is injuries usually occur, not a lot of strength gain because it's a power phase, not a strength phase. And so it kind of is chasing the tail a little bit, if you will. And so power is absolutely the goal we want to get to. But you need to make sure you're building your athletes up. You need to make sure like their shoulders are stable before you start doing power movements like power push-ups, plyometric, stuff like that. But in general, a good base of strength, then periodization in terms of the phases we teach, strength, power, and then power. And so power is almost in there as much as strength, but it's the balance of going through it and then also testing your athletes to know how strong or weak are they. That's another really good indicator, because if you take your athletes through those 7 tests, and then when we give you the standards and you see the levels, you're like, oh, we're not that strong. We need to work on strength. We're going to get to power in a little bit. So sometimes you put the horse before the cart a little bit in terms of trying to chase power, because I understand where coaches are coming from with that. But physiology wise, you need the base of strength to be able to support that power.
Okay, this one will be quick. Will you ever offer a Dryland course in person in Canada, maybe Ontario?
Maybe. Never say never. Not in winter, I'll tell you that.
Okay. Swimming is a hard sport on the shoulders. How can a coach know the difference between an injured shoulder and a sore shoulder?
Yeah, so we talk about in the certification the difference between pain and discomfort. And so I think that's a good thing to understand is, where does that line happen? And pain is usually a sharp thing, a sudden thing, but also the tricky thing, especially with the shoulders, is tendinitis is much more kind of masked as discomfort sometimes because it's slow burning. You think about those million pricks with the pin that I was talking about. And that's kind of what tendinitis and overuse injuries are. And so that's why if you assess your swimmers, if you then give them exercises, those functional solutions, you never even have to worry about that, because soon they're going to just magically disappear. I'll never forget when I just started working with kind of team after team, master swimmer after master swimmer, and I was just very diligent about the ratios and just making sure they're 1-to-1. And just shoulder injuries just started disappearing. I mean, I would get a coach, I'd get a team come on, they would onboard. Yeah, we got some shoulder problems. Okay. You know, like every other team. But then a few months later, we check in. You know what? I don't think shoulder injuries. I can't remember the last time I had a kid with a shoulder complaint. And so that's what just happens when you start to program. And then even more so if you do assessments and give them functional solutions to help with that.
Okay.
Questions though, guys?
Yeah, there's a lot. Love this one. Please let me know how to do Dryland during taper.
I didn't even go into this because I feel like this is a whole nother webinar in itself, and I packed so much into this one. But we even give, when we're talking about those checklists, we give taper recommendations, because I know as a coach, and Jason, you could agree, concur with this, that's a nervous time for a coach, right? You're like, all right, what's going to happen here? And we give specific recommendations on how to do it. The big kind of bullet note, if you will, is the closer you can keep intensity up to the meet, but reduce volume, you're going to do well. And a real quick story on that, Cullen, his last in-season meet before Olympic trials in 2008, him and I went to the weight room at the pool. The last meet, it was a Grand Prix meet here in Charlotte. So we knew the weight room, we knew the facility. We did a mini 10 to 15 minute workout that was shrunk down from his hour-long typical Dryland workout. Just enough to start getting a sweat on his forehead. Stopped the workout. He went, dried off, got clothes on or whatever, walked up to the blocks about 5-10 minutes later, did 50 free, best in-season time, lifetime to that point. And I mean, we were going pretty intense, but the duration, the volume was so short. So you can really get amazing results if you know what you're doing from that. That's the difference. Not hoping, not crossing your fingers and hoping this works, having a process to follow. Robert, Illinois, making the commitment.
Awesome.
Love it.
Awesome. I love this question, and I'm gonna piggyback on you after you answer it. Does training specificity in Module 7, is it designed based on ages? So 13 to 15-year-old, 10 to 12, etc.
Absolutely. And Module 7, actually, Jason, you have the link in the chat, right, where they can go to the certification, right?
Yes. Yep.
If not, just make it. I'm gonna go and share my other screen, guys, because I wanted to show this because it's pertinent to the question. So we talked about specificity. So you could see the modules here. This is the time of how long the lessons take to get through. So 2.5 hours, and all the videos, I should have said this, all the videos are about 5 to 10 minutes. So it's stack size. So we recommend you think about, if I spend 45 minutes a day, it'll take you 30 days to get through. Or if you want to go really hardcore, we've had some people go through it in 2 to 3 days, or you could stretch it out, obviously, a few months. But it tells you how long each video is and how long each module is. So first module is 2.5 hours, second one, 5 hours, third, 2.5, 2.5, one here. This is besides exercises, which is 5 hours. And there's a lot of stuff to cover in that. But the second biggest module is training specificity. And this is where, when I referenced the case studies earlier, this is where a ton of them are as well. So we talk about how old are your athletes, quote unquote, and there are different ways to categorize age for athletes. If you don't know that already, multiple ways to do that. Then when I talk about a 10-minute lesson on when should a swimmer lift. Then we have different coaching styles. So even like how you communicate, how you lay out the practice, masters Dryland. So I basically start from the oldest and work down to the youngest. And I take you through a case study of kind of an overview, and then actually what does this season, what does a single session look like? And what are the differences between a master's, college, high school, older age groupers like 11 to 14, or the younger age groupers, the 10 and unders. Dryland gains. How do you be stroke specific? How do you be event specific? How do you transfer Dryland gains to swimming speed? Should you do Dryland before or after swimming? What about longer sessions before swimming? What about shorter sessions after swimming? Energy-based sessions. So yeah, the training specificity module is huge in terms of what knowledge you're going to gain from that. But like I said, it's all building up to that point. It's almost the crescendo. Like, we can't just skip to the answers, because I want you to understand the why, so you understand the process of how I got you there. I can't remember if I point out in particular, but I know Jim had a really good quote about, he liked that he had a system that he understood why we were doing this. So then he, as a coach, can think through that grid in his specific situation. So I don't just want to give you the answers to the test, because your test is different than their test and different than their test, because we got coaches and swimmers all over the world in different situations. So some situations I might do this, other situations I might do that. So to make one test isn't going to work. So I'm going to show you how I arrive at the answers, and then you can figure out what works best in your situation. Jason, before you go, we have it's like a boatload of coaches.
I know.
I'll know if a bunch of teams just signed up or something. Oh, and I forgot to mention too, I'm so sorry. I had so much packed into this. If you sign up a team, it is a discount. I think it's 5 or more is a 20% discount. So think about signing up your staff as well. So I think, Jason, do you remember who I read off last on who was it? Brenna from Tennessee. We got Brad from Michigan, Nancy from Illinois.
Who signed up?
Michael,
I do not. No.
Michael from New York. I think I did Alberta from the UK. God, we're signing up now.
Yeah, this is crazy.
Awesome, guys. Way to make the commitment. Way to make the commitment. Yeah, let's get back to the questions, Jason.
Okay. How do you fit things like biking, running, and yoga into a design of a program, especially during lockdowns like where you're in now?
Say that again. Viking yoga.
How do you fit things like biking, running, and yoga into the design of a program?
I thought you said Viking. I was like, what?
That's actually how I do my Dryland.
I've not heard that type of training. So great question. And that's what I talked about in terms of the energy templates that we show you. And in that training specificity module that I just referenced, I really go into depth in terms of, okay, if you don't have water time, or you do, and you just want to supplement a little bit more metabolic energy, aerobic conditioning, however you want to term it, other than just strength training or mobility, flexibility work on Dryland, how does that fit in? Where do you do it? How long should you do it? We cover all of that. And I give you templates for how to construct those type of workouts as well. Man, we got another coach from the big state, Texas, Hector. Way to make the commitment. Excited about all these coaches already enrolling. Because we were announcing that enrollment started tomorrow. And I was like, you know what? We're doing the webinar. We should just start it tonight. Who cares? But this is awesome to see how many people are already signing up, and they only have a few days. So if you're thinking about it, you better make a decision quick. We are closing the doors Thursday night at midnight. No ifs, ands, or buts.
What do you recommend for Dryland training for a master swimmer that's 60 years old or more?
So this is actually what started Ritter as a company, if you will, was training master swimmers. I had a couple in their late 50s, early 60s. One in particular comes to mind. He was in his late 50s, coming off of a surgery. He was really depressed. He's like, Chris, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to swim again. I know I need to do some Dryland. I know, he's kind of do some physical therapy, but almost kind of the point where he kind of graduated physical therapy, and he's in this weird no man's land where, he's not able to go to physical therapist anymore, insurance, all that stuff. But he was healed necessarily, wasn't dealing with anything that someone that wasn't a physical therapist could work with. And I said, all right, let's do the assessments. And all this is remote. I never saw him in person. We did it all virtually, the same way we've laid out the stuff in the certification. And within a year, he was doing pull-ups with 30, 40 pounds around his waist and deadlifting over 350 pounds. A year after that, or it might have even been that year, I can't remember because I've worked with him for a number of years. He won the World Masters Championship for his age. And then another race, he got second, but it was to a former Olympian in like Russia or somewhere over there. And he had never even been Olympic trials when he was a swimmer. And so he's beating all his college times at like 56, 57. So this has just blown my mind when master swimmers I love working with, because they're so driven and like, just tell me what to do, Chris. They're very driven. They have their time, and they like going to the meets, especially when there are meets. But I think for master swimmers, it's really the secret weapon. And then it was crazy. That really blew up how many people we were training, because he was getting such good results. All his buddies were like, no, seriously, like, what are you taking? Like, what are you taking? I want some of that. And he's like, no, I'm working with Chris here. And so then all these other master swimmers started. And that's really what got us started as a company. So master swimmers are near and dear to my heart. And I mean, if I had to pick one, I'd say master swimmers probably benefit the most out of Dryland training. But I mean, every group does, but master swimmers, you're already declining muscle loss just naturally unless you fight it. So that's number one, why Dryland's going to help even more so. So you think about the math, put on top of that, you're already losing muscle mass every year unless you actively fight it. But then I think there's something about the recovery too. It helps and enhance that. So yeah, master swimmers, I mean, I don't care. We've worked with people in their 70s, even 80s as well. So there's no age limit to that.
All right. I like this one because I don't know the answer, and this should be interesting. I usually do. Is diaphragmatic breathing a good way to practice bracing for age groupers?
Oh, I love this question. So we actually have multiple lessons about diaphragmatic breathing and how to get your swimmers to do it if they don't. So I love whoever asked this question, you are already on the right track. Like you're
Taylor,
moving.
good question.
Taylor, awesome question. So yes is the answer, but the problem is I don't even think a lot of coaches think on the level you were thinking at, number one. So kudos to you for, again, coaches do this because they want to help. And just sometimes you don't have enough time to research all this stuff. So Taylor, good job on thinking about that stuff. But we have a couple exercises and I take you through a progression. If you have swimmers and most of your swimmers are probably chest breathers, how to give them some exercises to start to turn it from a chest breather into a belly breather and how that helps enhance swimming. So we talk about how you can get better in dryland, like without breaking a sweat. That should be the exercises we show, where if you can change the breathing patterns of a swimmer, it helps so much in a domino effect way down the chain in a lot of systems in the body. So we absolutely have multiple lessons on that exact topic. I love that question. It was Taylor, you said?
Alex Taylor.
Alex, you're gonna love if you enroll, Alex. You're already thinking on the level. You're gonna love that stuff. Dylan from California enrolling. Love it.
Nice. This is from Megan. How does this dryland translate to divers? We're getting very interesting questions tonight.
I love that. So divers, I mean, number one, I gotta give props to you. I don't know if I have the nerve, the courage or whatever to jump off a board at whatever height it is. And a good chance I might splat on my back. But diving, I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I know a lot about it. I know a little bit in that there were divers on my college teams and I observed them in practices and at meets. Other than that, I have no real experience in it. But power, we talk about power and strength, reactivity. Those are huge, right? If you could put more force into the board, you are going to go higher, which I would think then is going to help you move more. So while it's not the same thing as an aquatic based environment sport, funny enough, even though they combine them in college, but there's still a lot of things you can glean from enrolling about how to build an athlete. And yeah, I think it would be very beneficial into that. It's obviously not diving specific because that's not my area of expertise, but I absolutely think it would help your divers, or if you are a diver, whichever the case may be, have better performance, just enabling you to be a better athlete, and better athletes are going to have better results.
Okay, I think this next one might be a misunderstanding, but it'd be good to go over it. How do we get the perks offered tonight if we sign up today, which I think they are offered today? I think he's assuming they would only be offered tomorrow.
Oh, yep. So there should be an automatic email after you enroll that will send you it, or I might be speaking out of turn, Steph, our director of ops. If you don't get a second email tonight with those additional programs that we talked about, the Olympic year and the beginner, intermediate, no equipment year programs, just send an email to support@surgestrength.com and we will make sure that you get those. I actually don't remember that off the top of my head, if they were getting them immediately or tomorrow. So just send an email and Steph, our director of ops, will make sure that you get that. No worries.
Okay, I will be impressed if you know this off the top of your head. It's funny, you just mentioned Steph. Do you know how many CEUs from NASM you get for this SSDC?
Yeah, 1.9.
Oh, look at that. I am impressed. This is a good one, and it really relates to the course. Do you recommend doing dryland training before or after swimming? How intensive a dryland do you recommend if you do it before you swim? And what do you think breathing devices can help lung strength? I guess start with That's good job, Tariq. You snuck in 3 questions.
All right, Tariq. So if I go back here, and I'm not trying to avoid the question. What I want to show you. Okay, watch this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lessons to answer this question. Because this is not a simple answer. And again, I talked about module 7, training specificity, as kind of being the crux of like, now we get into all these questions that I usually get. There needs to be so many other things that you answer for me to answer that, right? So are you able to move what time you swim? Yes or no? Or can you move the schedule around? Or what are your hard practices, quote unquote, or are there harder practices? There are all these variables that go into Dryland. What I will tell you though, in the certification, whether you are stuck at a certain place where you can only do Dryland for X number of minutes before or after swimming, or maybe completely separate, I will show you how to best deal with that situation. So in an ideal world, I would like a mix of Dryland sessions standalone, where no water is before or after for half a day or at least a few hours. And then other sessions, I really liked when we were working with those guys working into the Beijing Olympics, where we would do an hour Dryland hard in the weight room and then do a 45-minute power sprint session in the pool. And I really felt that was a nice way to increase the transferability of what we were doing in the weight room. So I think some combination of that is the perfect or ideal, but I know almost every coach out there does not have the ideal situation where they have complete control over their facility. So better than tell you what's the best, I show you what the best thing is to do in your specific situation. Connie from Wisconsin, punching it in, enrolling, making the commitment. It's awesome. Jason, did I answer the question effectively or get through all that? I forget if there's anything else.
Yes, you did. If we have to wait till tomorrow to enroll, would we still get the extra Dryland programs and all the perks you mentioned?
You will not get the Olympic one. Olympic one disappears after tonight. You will get these. I think you get these all the way through. Again, double check with Steph. I know for sure you get them tonight. You will not get this tomorrow. I 100% know that. I'm pretty sure you get these and you do get the Zoom calls. But I think the Olympic one disappears after tonight.
So you can get everything but the Olympic one.
Yes.
After tonight.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. Love the questions, guys. Love that you guys, we got a lot of people still sticking on, going in almost.
I know, this is crazy.
Hour 50 minutes. You guys are troopers.
They're still
we got
coming.
All these people enrolling. This is awesome.
After a torn rotator cuff, I'm so hesitant on shoulder exercises. Are there certain modifications made for those recovering from injuries, or is the idea that you start at the bottom and work your way up enough to protect the swimmers?
No, I would be too, and I can appreciate that. So one, I always start with this. I am not a doctor, and I don't pretend to play a doctor. So as long as you are cleared from your physical therapist, healthcare practitioner, whoever was in charge of your care post that, whether there was surgery or just rehabilitation involved, if you've gotten to the point where you are quote unquote clear, then what I'm going to say applies. If not, then disregard everything I'm going to say. You need to go back to your healthcare provider and make sure they get you to that point where you could then start working with a personal trainer or that kind of level of rehabilitation, if you will. It goes back to the movement assessments and performance tests. That's why we start there. It's kind of like if you don't know where you're starting, how do you know if you're going to get to the end or not? You have to orient yourself on where am I today and where do I want to get to? So as long as you are cleared, I would then proceed with the movement assessments and performance tests, and that's going to slot you in. And let's say, for sake of argument, you go through the movement assessments and you have great shoulder mobility. I would highly doubt that after that type of injury. I would think that that's something you're going to have to work at, but let's just say you were all clean on that. And let's say on the performance tests, you're pretty average, like kind of middle of the road, level 2. If you even wanted to start off at level 1 exercises, especially for pushing, pulling, any kind of upper body movements, maybe even some bracing exercises that are using the shoulder, that's going to be fine. That's still going to be better than nothing. I think it's important to start where you're either at in terms of what the assessments and tests say, or what you're comfortable with, and just work from there. I know sometimes I would work with athletes where they had a bad experience with a certain exercise or a certain type of movement, and I would assess them and test them and be like, you're clear, you're good, but they still had something in their head mentally. And I said, okay, that's fine. As a coach, I got to meet them where they're at, right? I'm not going to force them into where they think they're going to get hurt, and then it's probably going to come to fruition just by the fact that they're thinking it. So I had to kind of scale it back a little bit, earn their trust, and they see, okay, everything's okay. I can keep going. So that's my long-winded answer to that. But I can appreciate why you're hesitant to that. But, take all what I said into consideration. Daniel, Pennsylvania.
Wow,
Enrolled. Mark it down.
This is from Dr. Brown. Chris, I tuned into your webinars about this time last year. It was kind of a precursor to the SSDC. Is it possible to still get those previous webinars? They're no longer on this site.
No, because we have 100 times better stuff in the certification. That was like my rough draft. If you could have like so many versions that are just so bad, those webinars. So if you appreciate those webinars, you're going to love the SSDC curriculum that we put together. That was like, I'm just going to throw some stuff up, see what sticks. And again, those webinars, I think we did 4, 5, or 6. So in totality, it's probably only 5 or 6 hours. 22 plus hours of content on the SSDC. So no, we took those down. That's not even relevant at this point after what we've created. Not that the content was irrelevant, but you understand what I'm saying. We built up a lot more substantially.
This is from Stan Wada. So I have already been implementing a 2-to-1 ratio on the hinge to squat and the pull to push. You said the sweet spot is 3 to 6. I'm assuming that means reps, 3 to 6 reps. I have been going
3 to 6 exercises.
Oh, okay. So I have been going
per circuit.
Hinge, pull, brace, squat, push, hinge, pull for the high performance group. Is this too much?
Slow down. I'm a visual person, Jason. I got to write this down. Say it again.
So Stan listed out the exercises he's doing, and he's going hinge, pull, brace.
Hold on, slower, Jason.
Sure.
Hinge, pull,
brace.
Squat,
push, hinge, pull.
Squat, push, hinge, pull.
For his high performance group, is that too much? So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7.
So I see what he's doing.
7 exercises.
So that's fine. Yeah. And again, guys, see, this is what I'm saying. It's not like I have some magic formula here. I even have to like write this down and make sure I kind of just process it through. Yeah, that's fine. I more say that on, I know coaches liked, or I shouldn't generalize, but I would run into enough coaches where they were doing circuits of like 20 plus exercises. So my bigger point is more, don't get into these monstrous number circuits because there's no way to monitor your ratios. You're going to just get a headache trying to think through all that. I would rather you make smaller, multiple circuits. So no, the fact that you're doing one more than I said the sweet spot is, that's fine. I think the more important thing is that you're following the ratios. So that's really the more important thing.
Good. Are there any CEUs available for NSCA or for ACE?
ACE maybe this summer, NSCA no, because they have changed their policy. I did not realize this. And I think it's actually because the CSCS is getting a little watered down in terms of people are not fully happy with what they get out. And so now NSCA says anything that is a certification does not count as CEUs, no matter what quality the content is. So that's tough. So we're not gonna worry about that now. And that was a new policy change because I've gotten CEUs from them before, but I think it's honestly them just trying to protect that specific certification brand, even though they haven't necessarily updated as needed to. That's a little politics really on the CEU game.
Do you think an age group swimmer's peak growth period plays a part into when a swimmer can begin strength training?
Not really. I think you have to be conscious of it. But what I talk about, and I'll give you the short thing on the lesson about when should kids lift, it really comes down to 2 questions, believe it or not. Are they excited about it? Are they engaged in it? Number 1, if it's yes, proceed. Next question is, are they going to listen to instruction and, not goof around? So if it's yes to both those, you can start. If it's not, and I know most of the time it's going to be in a group, so you're going to have to think of the group as a whole. But if it's not the best time to do it. If the kids are engaged, I've trained kids, 11 and 12, and they listen to instruction, they're excited about it. That's great. I've worked with 15-year-olds that didn't want to do weights at all, and it was awful. So when we talk about age too, I alluded to this earlier, there's different ways to categorize age. So he's talking about biological age as opposed to chronological age. And there's also training age. So I walk you through all these ages and thinking about the age of your athlete. Are you talking about chronological, biological, or training age? And then that reflects what you should do in training. But it really comes back to those 2 questions. Are they engaged in it? And are they going to listen to instruction?
All right. We made it to the end. 33 questions.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome, guys. All right. So, man, we have a ton of people. I'm just scrolling through all the people that have signed up and enrolled tonight. This is awesome. Feel free to send any more questions you have to Jason at rittersp.com. Open enrollment has started already. Obviously, we've had a bunch of people enroll tonight, which is awesome. It is going to go through Thursday night at midnight Pacific time. We will close doors after that, no exception. So fair warning, be ready. Like I said, the Olympic year, that will disappear after tonight at midnight. And then these other ones, I'm pretty sure they go through the duration of the open enrollment, or this one might disappear after tomorrow night. Check your emails. We will email you information on that. I just don't remember off the top of my head. And you can always email Jason at rittersp or Steph's support at surgestrength.com. But Jason, any more questions coming in? I'm going to close it up.
That's it.
Awesome. Everyone, thank you so much. We had a ton of people not only enroll, but just stick around for a 2-hour plus webinar. Definitely the longest we've ever done. Awesome. Thank you all. I appreciate it so much. Check your emails for more information and hope to see you in the Surge Strength Academy enrolled and earning your SSDC credentials soon. Thanks everyone again. We'll see you later.